noticed, it seems like it's getting hotter.
I'm just enjoying Babylon. How did we get here? How did we get here? I'm just enjoying Babylon. How did we get here? Slave shift, the father ain't nobody to be played with. My people broke the laws. Look at what it costs. Jerusalem, we at the bottom, y'all. Black man selling drugs, gang banging, ain't your culture. The more you say you walking there, they eat you like some okay. You ain't even black, that's a known fact. That's a color. You a Hebrew, you my brother. They want us to kill each other. We should really heal each other. He been through what you been through, y'all should feel each other. These scriptures could change any brother. I just see what Daniel saying, chapter 9-11. Oh, we ain't hear this from the reverend. We needed his message. We needed somebody to tell us that we really special. We made a covenant and one day he gon' use these vessels. It's all written, these bones living, we gon' fishing. We all in it, no wrong living, we all mission. This is not my homeland. This is not my way of life. Send us to our homeland. But we gon' get it right. Get this beam up on my eye so that I can see the light. We found out that it was Christ. Hung out Savior on the tree just like a Hebrew. You wanna get the system like a Hebrew. These folk change his name like a Hebrew. They hated on his frame like a Hebrew. Babylon falling and he coming for his people. Repent or die. Hearts on your Instagram to boost your ego. Who you gon' be, bro? Psalm 64-4. That they may shoot in secret at the perfect. No free throw. When the banks closed and all the council frozen, police ain't patrolling. Hospitals overflowing in the whole city smoking. Stealing and looting groceries. Fighting in the parking lot over a can of beans. Both get ran over by a vehicle that's stolen. The driver just keep going. She wanted me that didn't lost the line. 5-year power outages really the darkest times. Grown men filled with fear and crime. Home invasions, women raped, killing babies. Empty shelves, no food trucks, starvation. People won't believe and listen until it pop off. How you gon' leave when they got the bridges blocked off? When everybody lawless, no water out the faucet. The zombies out the coffins. Gotta be quiet and cautious. Strip you naked of any and all possessions. Streets looking like the old westerns. When you can't change your clothes, no dressing room. Know how to dress a wound. Know how to grow your own food or you just a coon. Prophesying through the microphone, a kufi on. When you stand before the Most High, it's gonna be you alone.
Play that again. Play that again. Play that again. YouTube and Facebook, listen to this. Listen to this.
I'm just enjoying Babylon. How did we get here? Slave shift, the father ain't nobody to be played with. My people broke the laws. Look at what it costs. Jerusalem, we lost. We at the bottom, y'all. We done lost it all. Black man selling drugs, gang banging, ain't your culture. The more you say you walking there, they eat you like some okay. You ain't even black, that's a known fact. That's a color. You a Hebrew, you my brother. They want us to kill each other. We should really heal each other. He been through what you been through, y'all should feel each other. These scriptures could change any brother. I just see what Daniel saying, chapter 9-11. Oh, we ain't hear this from the reverend. We needed his message. We needed somebody to tell us that we really special. We made a covenant and one day he gon' use these vessels. It's all written, these bones living, we gon' fishing. We all in it, no wrong living, we all mission. This is not my homeland. This is not my way of life. Send us to our homeland. But we gon' get it right. repent or die. One time for Hezekiah. Look, when it ain't no audience to praise you, no comments or hearts on your Instagram to boost your ego. Who you gon' be, bro? Psalm 64 and 4. That they may shoot in secret at the perfect. No free throw. When the bank's closed and all the council frozen, police ain't patrolling, hospitals overflowing, in the whole city smoking, stealing and looting groceries, fighting in the parking lot over the beans. Poking ran over by a vehicle that stole it. The driver just keep going. She want a minute, they done lost the line. 5-year power outages, really the darkest times. Grown men filled with fear and crime. Home invasions, women raped, killing babies, empty shelves, no food trucks, starvation. People won't believe and listen until it pop off. How you gon' leave when they got the bridges blocked off? When everybody lawless, no water out the faucet, the zombies out the coffins. Gotta be quiet and cautious. Strip you naked of any and all possessions. Streets looking like the old westerns. When you can't change your clothes, no dressing room. Know how to dress a wound. Know how to grow your own food or you just a coon. Prophesy through the microphone, a kufi on. When you stand before the most high, it's gonna be you alone.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Facebook Live, good morning, Breaking Stronghold Ministries. Good morning, YouTube with Orlando Keeping It Simple. How's everybody doing this morning? How's everybody doing this morning? I know I'm running a little late this morning, but I couldn't understand what the Most High was talking to me about this morning, so I had to continue to just listen to him and see what he had for me to do, but now I understand. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to be honest. Did I tell you the music to play today?
No.
Say it loud and clear.
No.
I did not tell you what to play this morning, okay?
No. He said, who you gonna call when it all falls down?
Okay.
That's what he said.
Okay, I understand that. No, I did
Who you gonna
not.
call when it all falls down?
Who you gonna call when it all falls
Falls
down?
down.
Who you gonna call? That's the name of that song. Who you gonna call when it
No,
all
it's
falls
called
down?
Fall Down. The Times.
It's the times.
And it's Fall Down.
It's fall down. Okay. Well, how's everybody doing this morning? I hope everybody had a great week this week. I hope you have been blessed over and abundantly with love. I hope that the Most High have given you wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And I hope that he has just given you everything your heart desire. I hope he has blessed your offsprings. I hope he has blessed you over and abundantly with love. I say this every week, and I don't see nobody in the comments say, "No, we care about how you doing," but I'm gonna say it anyway. Even though you may not care how I'm doing, I'm gonna tell you how I'm doing and how was my week. This week has been a pretty good week for me. I really can't complain, but I didn't really understand why I was going through the things that I was going through this week. I really didn't. And I guess it started last Sunday. My wife and I, we go get training on weapons. And we went last Sunday to get training on weapons for about 3 hours. Did you like it, baby?
Yes.
You liked it?
Yes.
You enjoyed it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we went and got training on some weapons last week, and we had a really great time. And it brought out some things in me that I know I needed to do more of. Sometimes we as people, we are too, I don't want to say complacent, but we're not aggressive enough in life. We're not aggressive enough in what we want. We're not aggressive enough in whatever our heart desires. And I learned that this week. Sometimes being passive, you don't get the same results as being aggressive. Being a passive and being aggressive, it's two different results, two different responses. And I learned last week when I was at weapons training that my instructor looked at me as a passive student and not an aggressive student. And it was all because of my demeanor. And I had to realize that, hey, I need to be more aggressive and more assertive in my training because when you're on the battlefield, you can't be passive. You got to be very aggressive. You got to be courageous. You got to be determined. You got to be strong-willed in order to win the fight. And one of the guys that I went with, he's a young guy. I really like him a lot. Young guy, about 25 years old. But his mentality when he's out on the range shooting is totally different. He's very aggressive. He's very confident in himself. And he knows what he got to do, and he go out and do it. Even when it comes down to purchasing the type of weapons that he need to make sure that he's going to be successful. And see, sometimes passive people say, well, I just need something just to protect myself. I don't really need the best of the best. But aggressive people, confident people, they go out and get the best of the best that they need, and they utilize that equipment to the best of their abilities. So when it's time for them to use it, they're confident, not just in themselves, but they're confident in the equipment. But passive people, oh, I just need this. I'll be okay with just this. And oh, I just need that. And I just be okay with that. And I don't need that. I don't need to go to the gun range as much because I don't think I'm gonna need this, and I don't think I'm gonna need that. It's a big difference in a passive or courageous person and a person that is fearful and passive. It's a big difference in how people train, how they act, how they lead, how they guide people even when it comes down to the combat zone or even when you in a hostile environment. Either you're passive or you're aggressive. You can be in the middle, passive aggressive, but whatever outweighs the most, that's what you're going to more lean towards. I only have to be aggressive when I need to, but I can be in the middle. I want to be passive when I only need to be passive when I need to be. You got to either you be passive aggressive or you be aggressive or passive. You can be in the middle, but it can be hard. But that's what I learned last week. And then all this week, I don't normally look at a lot of videos about weapons. And last week I was just looking at a lot of videos about weapons, because I needed to purchase another weapon. And, huh? What'd you say?
I said need it.
Yeah, I needed it. But I never understood what the Most High was doing at the time. You know, I never knew. So now, you know, all this week I was just going through the process of doing what I'm doing. And I woke up this morning and I was like, all right, Most High, what you want? What you want me to do? How you want me to do it? And he told me to turn to 2 Samuel. And turn to 2 Samuel, we're going to go to chapter 1. But that's the title of where we're going to go today. But I want to go ahead and go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. But I want us to understand that we got to look at everything that's going on in the world today. That song my wife just played, that's what's going to happen. Everything that you heard in that song, that's what's going to happen. And you got to know how to be able to do those things. But let us go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. 1 through 17. Exodus 20, 1 through 17. And it reads, And El spake all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah thy El, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, and thou shalt have no other Els before me. And thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heavens above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. And thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahuwah thy El, am a jealous El, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of Yahuwah thy El in vain, for Yahuwah will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah thy El. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservants, nor thy maidservants, nor thy cattle, nor thy strangers that is within thy gates. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Yahuwah blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days be long upon the land which Yahuwah thy El giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbors, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor. Let us pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine to your kingdom, power to your glory, forever and ever. So let it be. Yes, good morning again. Also, let me piggyback. I remember one day I was at the gun range, right? And there was a guy. If you could, go ahead and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17 through 27. But I'm only going to deal with verse 18. You know, I was at the gun range and I was shooting outdoors. And it was a guy in a wheelchair that couldn't use his legs. But it was a guy in a wheelchair at the gun range shooting his weapon in his wheelchair. At the gun range shooting his wheelchair. And I'm just like, man, he understands the importance of self-defense regardless if he's handicapped or not handicapped. You know, it was amazing to me that this guy decided to still go to the gun range and shoot. You know, it just amazed me. But I'm going to go ahead and read the key verse. The key verse this morning is, also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. The word bade means it's a primitive root, to say or use with a great latitude, answer or point or vouch, bid, boast self, cause, certify, challenge or charge. He also charged them, teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. You see why I said that, right? Okay. So now this is right after, okay, the title of the text today is You Gotta Know How to Fight. The title of the text today is You Got to Know How to Fight. That's the title of the text today. You gotta know how to fight. And the words today, the word train, which I'm using it in the verb sense, it's an action word. Train means to discipline, teach, bring to desired state by means of instructions. Okay, it's a 14th century word. It also means to draw out and manipulate in order to bring to a desired form. That's what it means. The word train means to discipline, teach, bring to a desired state by means of instructions. The word fight means combat, hostile encounter, contends with weapon, attack, gain by fighting. That's what the word fight means. Combat, hostile encounter, contends with weapon. Attack. That's what it means, okay? The word train means to discipline, teach, bring to a desired state by means of instructions. So, in this text in 2 Samuel chapter 1, why is David saying this? Why is David using this poem? Why is David telling the children of Israel they need to start training with the bow? This was right after the death of Saul. And Saul had just got killed in war. And this is the time that David was getting ready. This was right when David was getting ready to take over leadership of the children of Israel. And this is what happened when David. This is the initial part of, or the beginning stages of when David getting ready to go to war or take over leadership of Israel. This is when Saul died. And what David was doing was giving some instructions for the children of Israel to get ready to do some things. This is when, because Israel's biggest enemy was the Philistines. Their biggest enemy was the Philistines. And Saul got killed by the Philistines. So then when Saul got killed by the Philistines, it was time for David to start to take over and start to become the man in charge, or to become the king in charge. And this was at the burial of Saul. But I want to read you something in 1 Chronicles chapter 10. It says, Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain. And the Philistines followed hard after Saul and after his son. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and his sons and the sons of Saul. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archery hit him, and he was wounded. So when Saul was fighting against the Philistines killed Saul's sons, and then they wounded Saul. They didn't actually kill Saul. They wounded Saul. Saul was wounded in battle. Okay? So then in verse 4, it says in chapter 10 in First Chronicles, it says, Then said Saul to his armor bearer, Draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon him. So what is it saying? That when Saul was fighting against the Philistines, they was losing against the Philistines. And when Saul's sons got killed and Saul got wounded, Saul did not want the Philistines to take him captive and make a mockery of him. So what Saul did was commit suicide, basically, in the time of war. Saul committed suicide. So when Saul committed, how he committed suicide, he fell on the sword and the sword went through and killed him. So it also says in verse 5, it says, And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise on the sword and died. And so Saul died, and his three sons, all his households died together. All of them died on the battlefield. All of Saul's sons and Saul died on the battlefield. So when we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 1, this is what David was talking about when David heard the death of Saul. And this was like at the burial, and this is when everything was taking place after the fact. This was after the fact of Saul being killed. If anybody who's listening to me don't know who Saul is, Saul was the first king of Israel that was appointed by Samuel. Because the children of Israel said, let me have a king like other nations. So the Most High appointed Saul as the king. But prior to Saul, it was just prophets. But let me read you some of it in 2 Samuel verse 1. It says, Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, understanding that David was winning wars. He was winning fights. He knew how to fight. But Saul did not know how to fight. And what I want to talk about today, he didn't know how to fight, because I go to it later. Okay, and it says, and David had a beard 2 days. And it says, and it came even to pass on the third day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul, with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And so it was when he came to David, that he fell to the earth and did obedience. And he started to go tell David what actually happened to Saul in the war. He was telling David what actually happened to Saul in the war. And David, at this point in time, was starting to make the people understand what they needed to do after the death of Saul. David did not want to make Saul look bad in the eyes of the public. David did not want to. Let me read some of it. It says in verse 7, and David lamented with these limitations over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. So David was kind of grieved because Saul had passed away, even though Saul tried to kill David, even though Saul was jealous of David, even though Saul did not like David. David was still lamenting. He was still going through the grieving process of Saul dying, because David was a faithful servant. And then it says, and he bid them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is in the book of Jasher. This is the book of Jasher right here. Then it says, the beauty of Israel is slain upon the high places. How are the mighty fallen? Then it says, tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistine rejoice, and lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. So what David was trying to do, even after this death of Saul, he was trying to make sure that people do not have the right to brag and boast about the death of Saul. Because he said, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice because they just killed the king of Israel. Then it says, and lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Means they don't nobody need to be happy. Don't tell nobody nothing. He said, publish it not in the streets. Don't publish it nowhere. Don't let nobody know what just happened. Because we don't need nobody rejoicing over the death of the Israel king. We don't need them to be triumphant. We don't need them to do anything. We don't need them to be doing anything about the death of Saul. Then it says, ye. Then it goes down and says, ye mountain of Gibbo, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty is valley cast away, for the shields of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. It says, from the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul remembered not empty. Saul and Jonathan was lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. See, David, even in the midst of them dying, even though they was whatever, I'm finna tell you, I'm going to show you, this is going to be a comparison and contrast teachings today. Listen to that. He said, Saul and Jonathan was lovely and pleasant in their lives. And in their death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were divided. They were stronger than lions. Jonathan was faithful to David. Jonathan was on the side of David. But what David tried to say is, Jonathan was going to back his father Saul up regardless of what the situation was. Even this is what David was saying about the kings of Israel. But we got to understand, why was he saying this? Because they died on the battlefield. He was giving them a heroic message at their burial. He was giving them a heroic ceremony. He was telling the people that these are some great people. These were some great warriors. He was giving them a heroic message. And it says in verse 24, verse 24, ye daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and other delights, who put an ornament of gold upon your apparel. How are the mighty fallen in the midst of battle, O Jonathan? Thou wast slain in thy high places. He's just trying to praise, he's lifting Saul up so much about what Saul did for the children of Israel, even though he was the one that was doing all the giving to the children of Israel. He was in the ones that was winning the war. David knew he was winning the war. David knew he was doing the things for the children of Israel, but he was lifting Saul up in the midst of his death. It's just like when we go to a funeral, we know a person wasn't that bad, but we say, well, he did do some good things sometimes. Well, he wasn't that bad, but I'm glad he gone home to be with the Lord. That's what we would say about a bad person. Well, I'm glad he ain't in misery no more. Even though you know he deserved to be in misery and so forth and so forth, you'll say good things about this person even though they don't deserve to be anything good need to be said about them. Because David shouldn't have had to say, David should be bad mouthing Saul, but David not bad mouthing Saul, because the simple fact is, Saul tried to kill David 2 times. Saul hated David. Saul was jealous of David. All these things. I just said it, but I'm going to say it again. Saul did all these things today, but in this moment here, David was still lifting Saul up. He was lifting Saul up. And it says in verse 26, I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. What David was saying was Jonathan was more faithful to David than women was to men. And he was just using that as a comparison that, man, Jonathan was my boy. If I couldn't go to no woman for no help, if I couldn't go to no woman for no advice, I can go to my buddy Jonathan. Jonathan be right there with me. Jonathan would like down me like 4 flat tires, as we said in the neighborhood. Then it says, how are the mighty men fallen and the weapon of war perish? How did this happen? How did it happen? Because we got to understand when we go back up a little bit, right? Let's go back up. Saul just died in the war against the Philistines. But in verse 2 it says that, in verse 1 it says, now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had abided 2 days. Meaning that David just came out of war, and Saul didn't make it out of war. So what is the difference between Saul and David? Because understand that we got to know how to fight. We got to learn how to fight. We got to have certain elements about our character in the midst of getting ready to go into fighting. Because if we don't have the elements or we don't have the characteristics, we cannot win a war when it's time to fight. We cannot. We cannot win a fight. And I want us to be able to look at the characteristics between Saul and David, and see why David is why David is so successful and why Saul is not. Okay, I want us to understand that. So let us turn to let us turn to 1 Samuel chapter 28. And I'm talking about Saul right now. I'm going to talk about Saul right now. Okay? Then I'm going to come back and talk about David. Okay? I'm going to talk about Saul. I'm going to get one for Saul, then I'm going to get one for David, and then I'm going to read the scripture. 1 Samuel 28, verse 5. I'm going to go to verse 4 and 5. Understanding that when you know you're getting ready to go to war with somebody, your biggest and your rival enemies, it's a certain characteristic that you know you got to have in the midst of that. It's just like a dog only attack people who they know that are afraid of them. Your enemies only deal with you because they know that you are afraid of them. If they know that you're not afraid of them, they won't attack you on a regular basis like they do. Like I tell people all the time, a bully is only a bully because the person don't stand up and fight. But a bully can't be a bully if the person is standing up. That means they just finna go toe to toe, and the bad man win. So in 1 Samuel 28 and 4, it says, and the Philistines gathered themselves together and came and pitched in Shunan, Shuim, pitched in Shuim. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they pitched on Gibal. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, listen to the next 3 words. He was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of Yahuwah, Yahuwah answered him not, neither by dream, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. So when we look at Saul, Saul was a very fearful king. He did not have the courage to go fight in wars and battles. Saul was very fearful. He did not want to encounter, he didn't want to participate in war. Saul just wanted to sit on the throne and rule from that position. That's Saul. Saul was very fearful. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. Verse 32. Through 34. And it reads, even when, I'm going to get to this in a minute, but even when David came, I tell you, let me read this. And David said to Saul, listen who's talking. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Talking about Goliath. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of Goliath. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. The king Saul, and Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from youth. And listen to what David said. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a bear, and a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flocks. I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defiled the army of the living El. See, the difference between David and Saul when they getting ready to go into battle. Saul was sitting on the throne and appointed David to go fight against Goliath. If anything, Saul should have been down there fighting Goliath. But Saul didn't go down there and fight Goliath because Saul was too afraid to go fight Goliath. But David had the courage to go fight for the army of Israel. Right now, when we getting ready, hold on, let me read this. Go to Ephesians 6 and 10. And see, when I was at the gun range last week, and I was just dealing with that young guy encouraged me to do more and be better. And I tell them that all the time now, because sometimes when we're dealing with people, indirectly and directly, they can be supporting helpmates to push you to do better, to get more courage, get more strength. And that's what that young guy did. And he's pushing me to be more courageous in whatever I do and be more confident in what I have. In Ephesians 6:10, it says, finally, my brother, be strong in Yahuwah and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of air that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. See, that's the difference between Saul and David. David was able to trust in the Most High during his battle, because he's looking back at what the Most High allowed David to do in the midst of his battles. See, in 35 it says, and I went out after him, he talking about the lion, and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. See, David is giving credit to the Most High for David winning that fight against the lion in the battle. That's what gave David the courage to go fight against Goliath, because David understood that everything that he did came from the Most High. But Saul didn't give no credit to the Most High for nothing, because Saul was just wanting to be a physical king and not really a leader that was guided by the Most High. And see, in this time that we're in right now, when we get ready to learn how to fight, we can't have fear. We got to have courage. We got to have a lot of courage to know that the Most High brought me to this point. He'll take me through this point. And see, what happened last week is just a piggyback off of what we're supposed to be doing today. Because you got to be able to have courage for this part right here. I'm going to talk about this again. It says, Matthew 24:13, it says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. See, you got to have courage to want to endure to the end. You got to want to have courage to want to endure the suffering of false religions. You got to want to have the courage to want to endure the world wars that's taking place. You got to have the courage to want to be able to go through personal afflictions. And see, Saul, he was afraid to go through anything like that. So how could Saul could be a great example of failure when it comes down to war? When you analyze Saul's behavior, you analyze, and that's what we're doing today. If you analyze everything about Saul, you'll recognize that he was a coward. And most cowards normally die on the battlefield. See, Hannibal of Corinth, Carthage. And I think y'all need to do some research on Hannibal of Carthage, right? Hannibal of Carthage was a Hebrew, and he lived in Carthage. And he had fought against the Roman Empire. And this man killed over 75,000 soldiers in one day. He was the best known warrior or soldier on the battlefield. He was a Hebrew out of Carthage. Google it, research it. How he defeated the Roman military. He defeated them, and he defeated them. He killed over 75,000 or 70,000 soldiers in one day. because of his courage on the battlefield. He was relentless. He took his soldiers through so many obstacles to let them know that if they can make it through those obstacles, now when it's time to fight the Roman military or the Roman soldiers, it wouldn't be no problem, and they annihilated the Roman soldiers. Hannibal from Carthage, look him up, research him. So now we see that Saul, in the midst of battle, he was afraid. David wasn't afraid. David had courage because he knew that the Most High had delivered him. Let's go to 1 Samuel 15 and 11. Talking about Saul again. And we're doing a compare and contrast because you got to understand it. Everything that you see going on in the day, into world today, it's just leading up to war, conflicts, problems, civil wars, world wars. You see all these things getting ready to take place. And it's going to come a time where you may have to do some battle. You may have to have some conflicts with people, whether it's with physical conflict or whether it's with a weapon conflict. You may have to do some battles. And how you go into that battle means a whole lot. You got to have courage. Okay? Second one, let's look at this one. Talking about disobedience. And how foolish and transgression was Saul. First Samuel 15 and 11, it reads, I'm going to go to 10, and I'm going to verse 10. It says, Then came the word of Yahuwah unto Samuel, saying, It repented me that I have set up Saul to be king. For he has turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments. It grieved Samuel, and he cried unto Yahuwah all night. And when Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set him up a place, and is gone about, and passed on, and gone down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed be thou of Yahuwah. I have performed the commandments of Yahuwah. And Samuel said, What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in my ear, and the lowings of the ox which I hear? But what it said in verse 11, the Most High said, It repented me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he is turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto Yahuwah all night. So Samuel wasn't just a fearful king or a fearful person. He was also disobedient of the instructions that was given to him, or the commandments that was given to him. Also, let's go to First Chronicles. First Chronicles, chapter 10, 13 and 14. So when Saul did not obey the commandments of the Most High, also let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 10, 13 and 14. It said, So Saul died for his transgressions. So Saul died for his transgression which he committed against Yahuwah, even against the word of Yahuwah, which he kept not. And also for asking counsel of one that has a familiar spirit to inquire of it, and inquired not of the son, and inquired not of Yahuwah. Therefore he slew him, and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse. So the reason why Saul, one of the main reasons why Saul was killed because of his disobedience. His disobedience. Saul was a fearful person, but he was also a disobedient king to the Most High. Saul didn't obey the law, statutes, and commandments. Let's go to 1 Samuel 13. Let's see what this one says about David. 13 and 14. Now, this is what it is in Samuel, 1 Samuel 13 and 14. It says, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. Yahuwah has sought him a man after his own heart. And Yahuwah has commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Yahuwah commanded thee. Let's look at this. David was appointed because the Most High knew the intentions of David. He knew that David would keep the commandments. He knew that David would do what was told. 2 Samuel 12, 7 through 9. It reads, and Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus saith Yahuwah, El of Israel. I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hands of Saul. The Most High appointed David king because he knew the hearts of David. Then it says in verse 8, I gave thee thy master's house, thy master's wives into thy bosoms, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been done too little, I would have moreover have given unto you such and such. David was given everything. The Most High appointed David for everything. David was the man that followed the Most High's heart. David had the king's heart. This is what it says in 1 Kings 18 and 18. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of Yahuwah. He's talking about Solomon. Solomon's father David obeyed the commandments. Saul did not obey the commandments. You cannot go into battle and not listen to the instructions that is given to you when it's time for you to go into battle. See, I can't continue to go to my gun trainers and they tell me, don't put your whole finger on the trigger, and I constantly put my whole finger on the trigger, but expecting to hit in the middle of the target, but I'm always fading to the right or to the left of the target. It does me no good to go to the gun range and listen to my instructors if I'm not going to take heed to their instructions. It does me no good. It's like one day my wife was going to work and she had a GPS on, right? And she was trying to do things her way, but she was also listening to the GPS. But then the Most High told her, he said, see, I'm going to be talking to you like the GPS is talking to you when it's time for you to go where you need to go. And you're going to have to listen. I think I'm paraphrasing what you said, right? You remember that, don't you? What did you say?
Go ahead.
And see, my wife wasn't listening to the GPS. She was trying to do it the way she wanted to do it. But the Most High told her, I'm going to be like the GPS to you in your ears telling you where to go and how to go. You just going to have to be able to listen to me when it's time for you to listen to me. And see, when we have to, in Revelation 12:6, when we have to go to the wilderness, we're going to have to know whose voice we're listening to when it's time for us to go to the wilderness. We're going to have to be obedient to the word of the Most High at that time. We can't just be courageous at that moment of conflict, but we're going to have to listen to the voice.
Specific instructions.
Yes, we're going to have to listen to specific instructions. And see, that's something that we got to understand. David was listening to instructions. David was obedient to the commandments. Saul was not. But even when you go to take fighting lessons or boxing classes, 'cause my wife and I, we did about 4 or 5 months of kickboxing classes. It wasn't do us no good to go to the kickboxing class and then listen to the instructor. We did what we wanted to do. That was the difference between David and Saul. Saul was disobedient in listening to the instructions of Yahuwah, but David wasn't. Okay? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 17. I'm going to go to verse 16. It says, ye shall not tempt Yahuwah your El, as ye tempt him in Massa. As ye tempt him in Massa, ye shall diligently keep the commandments of Yahuwah your El, and his testimonies and his statutes which he had commanded thee. Thou shalt do that which is right and good in the sight of Yahuwah, that it may be well with thee, and that thou may go in and possess the good land which Yahuwah swore unto thy fathers. See, how could Saul go in and kill the Philistines when he was disobedient? The only reason why David was able to go in and possess the land and kill the Philistines because he was obedient. You just can't have courage. You got to have obedience along with it. But when you're fearful and you're disobedient and you're foolish and when you're disobedient, how can you go in there and do anything? You're not following nothing. You're not following no instructions. That's the difference right now. But those are two things of Saul and David that we got to understand. Also, let's go to 1 Samuel. Let's go back to Saul. We're talking about Saul. Let's go to 1 Samuel. Let's go to 13. 1 Samuel 13 and 13. 1 Samuel. Let's go to 12 and 13. It says, therefore said I, the Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplications unto Yahuwah. I forced myself therefore and offered a burnt offering. Listen to what he said. He said, he made no supplications unto Yahuwah. I forced myself therefore in offering a burnt offering. He said, I don't force myself to do all this. And Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandments of Yahuwah thy El, which he commanded thee. For now would not Yahuwah have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. Saul was foolish. He didn't do nothing. Also, let's go to 1 Samuel 28, 7 through 15. Then said Saul unto his servant, seek me a woman that has a familiar spirit. Familiar spirit is a person that is in witchcraft. Okay. Then said Saul unto his servant, seek me a woman that has a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman that has a familiar spirit in Endor. And Saul disguised himself, and put on the other raiments. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment. And he went, and two men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up, whom I shall name unto thee. And the woman said unto him, behold, thou knowest what Saul has done, how he has cut off those that have familiar spirits. And the wizard, that's what a familiar does. That's what a familiar is. And the wizard out of the land, wherefore then laid thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die. And Saul sware to her by Yahuwah, saying, as Yahuwah liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. Then said the woman, whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, bring me up Samuel. And the woman saw Samuel. She cried with a loud voice, and the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw God ascending out of the earth. And he said to her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me. And God is departed from me, and answered me no more, neither by prophet nor by dream. Therefore I have called thee, that thou may make known unto me what I should do. Listen to that thou make known that thou may make known unto me what I shall do. See, Saul, being a king, seeking worldly advice on a spiritual situation. Saul was fearful, Saul was disobedient, and Saul was seeking advice from man on what he should do about a situation. Saul was one of the worst kings that we probably could have had in the book. Because Saul was jacked up. Let's go to David. Let's go to 1 Samuel 23. 1 through 4. This is a compare and contrast. First Samuel 23, 1 through 4, and it reads, Then they told David, saying, Behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they robbed the threshing floor. Therefore David inquired, listen to this. Therefore David inquired of Yahuwah, saying, Shall I go and smite these Philistines? And Yahuwah said unto David, Go and smite the Philistines. And David, verse 3, and David men said unto him, Behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the army of the Philistines? Then David inquired of Yahuwah yet again, and Yahuwah answered him and said, Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thy hands. Let's go to Isaiah 55 and 6. I'm going to go to 555 first. Behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou knowest not, and nations that knew not thee shall run unto thee because of Yahuwah, thy El, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified thee. Seek ye Yahuwah while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his ways, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return unto Yahuwah, and he will have mercy upon him. And to our heir he will abundantly pardon. Verse 6. Seek ye Yahuwah while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. See the difference between David and Saul? David prayed to the Most High to ask him what he should and shouldn't do. how he should and should do it before he went into battle. After Saul was so disobedient, and after the Most High done took the kingdom away from him, that's when Saul wanted to try to seek advice, but it was too late. David was courageous. David was obedient. And David seeked the Most High during these times. He was seeking for instructions on how to do things. He was seeking how he should do it, the way he should do it, what he should do. Because we have to understand that I was listening to this thing yesterday, right? It says that we're finna get ready to have a diesel shortage. Meaning that if we have a diesel shortage by, say, August, we have a diesel shortage by August. That means that airplanes run by diesels, trucks run by diesel. A lot of big engines run by diesel. That means that, say hypothetically, if say 25% of the trucks that is functioning on the highways and byways are not able to run because it's a shortage of diesel fuel, how would it affect the economy? How would it affect the stores? How would it affect everything? How would it affect your living? We're having a fuel shortage. So we got to understand, how would it affect everything around me? We have to understand that the truck drivers go to hospitals. They go to grocery stores. They go to the gas stations. Truck drivers deliver everything to every market in the industry on this planet in the United States. You don't think Roe versus Wade is not going to bring an impact in our society? Where some people are going to be upset because they can't have, they feel like they lost their right to their choice on how they want to use their bodies? You don't think there may be a conflict behind that? Women feel like they don't have a right to do what they want to do with their bodies? You don't think it's going to be a problem with that in our society? They saying that people are not able to find jobs, even though they're saying that the job market is, a lot of people are looking for jobs. No, you can't find a job. You don't think that's going to have any effects on our society? When people can't find no job, the trucks are not moving. Ain't no food going to the grocery stores or the gas station. You don't think that's going to have an impact on you? What am I saying? Salvation. What's my salvation in this? My death is Saul. Death is Saul because Saul died on the battlefield. Saul was fearful. Saul was disobedient. Saul took worldly advice for a spiritual problem. My salvation is courage, of being courageous in Yahuwah and seeking his face through all things that we may encounter. We got to have courage right now more than anything, any other time. We can't put our head in the sand. We can't keep ignoring it. We got to face it with courage. We got to face it with obedience. When we got to face these situations with the Most High's word. Thus said the word. This is what you said. This is what you said. This is what you said you would do for me. This is the way we got to be right now more than ever before. Because there's some people out here really training. There's some people out here really preparing. There's some people out here really getting ready. Because they see that it's a war on the horizon. They see what's going on in the world. And they're not trying to turn a deaf ear to it. They accepting the reality for what it is and they moving forward in it. Those people who want to turn a death into it is like Saul. They fearful because they don't know what's going to happen. The disobedience of the word and don't believe that the Most High going to bring judgment on the earth. And they seeking worldly advice. You don't really think that's going to happen. I don't really think that's going to happen. Instead of reading the word for themselves. Because if you really doing this, you will understand that the Most High said, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring destruction. If you really was doing this, you would not be afraid. It says, study to show thyself approved unto El, a workman that needed not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You'll be studying, you'll understand that we are in these times where he's going to bring all these things. So if we're in this time, and he said, he that endures to the end shall be saved, meaning that your saving comes if you're able to make it through all those trials and tribulations. And how are you going to make it through those trials and tribulations? You got to have courage, you got to have obedience, and you got to be seeking him. Or you got to be seeking that word daily. And if you're not doing that, how can you be saved? How would you know how to fight? Because the title of the text is, you got to know how to fight. Because what did David say? And he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. The common bow for today is a 9mm, 357, Glock 19, Glock 17, a Glock 380, Smith & Wesson 380, a 22, 357, AR, AK-47. That's the bow for today. That's the bow for today. In the book of Joshua, chapter 56, verse 8, it says, And Jacob said unto Judah, I know, my son, that thou art a mighty man, for thy brethren reign over them, and thy sons shall reign over their sons forever. Only teach thy sons the bow and all weapons of war, in order that they may fight the battles of their brothers who will rule over their enemies. And Jacob again commanded his sons on that day, saying, Behold, I shall be this day gathered unto my people, carry me up from Egypt, and bury me in the caves. Let me read it over. Verse 9. Only teach thy sons the bow, the gun, and all the weapons of war, in order that they may fight the battles of their brothers who will rule over their enemies. See, we've been taught a lot of lies about war. See, the Most High never wants you to be passive. He wants you to be courageous. He wants you to be disciplined. And he wants you to be obedient to his word, seeking his word. He never wants you to be passive, fearful, disobedient, and asking for worldly advice. But let me say this. I'm finished. Your salvation comes when you're obedient. When you have courage and you're seeking the Most High's word. That's your salvation. Be like David. Don't be like Saul. Let me pray real fast and then I got to say something. Abba, as we come to you today, we thank you, we bless you, we praise you, we give you all the honor and the glory. Abba, we thank you for everything that you have done, what you continue to do. Abba, we just thank you just being you. We thank you for giving us sight to see, ears to hear, and a mouth to speak. But let us hear the way you want us to hear, see the way you want us to see, and speak the way you want us to speak. Abba, we did a comparison and contrast between David and Saul, the first king that we wanted and the king that you appointed. We see that there's a big difference. We see that the man that we wanted was fearful and disobedient and sought and seek worldly advice. But we see that the man that you appointed, he was obedient, he was courageous, and he seeked your face. So, Father, as we come to you this morning, this afternoon, we ask that you continue to help us to be courageous. We ask that you continue to help us to be obedient and seeking your word daily through this warfare that we're going through, physically and spiritually. We ask that you continue to guide us and lead us and cover us. We ask that you continue to direct our footsteps and protect us as we travel these highways and byways. Father, we ask that you forgive us for the sins that we committed knowingly and unknowingly. We ask that you continue to let us speak the truth and stand on the truth in the midst of our adversaries. But Father, some of us are afraid. Some of us are afraid to take the first step because we don't know. Some of us are afraid of what to do because of what we heard other people say. But we ask that you put people in our lives to help us to get where we need to go so we can be who we need to be. Abba, forgive us for being fearful. Forgive us for not protecting us ourselves the way we should. But Abba, guide us in this way that we're going. And in all these things we pray, so let it be. And let me say this. I called one of my gun instructors my weapon instructors on yesterday. He probably gonna get back with me. But anyone who's seeking to get weapons training, who want to learn how to shoot a weapon, put it in Facebook. And when I get enough people to go, let me know if you want to go. I can make sure that you're in this class that I'm going to have set up so that you can get some weapons training. So if you want to go to the next weapons training that I'm going to coordinate with my instructor, please let me know in Facebook because you're going to need it. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your time, your energy, YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for everything you've done, what you continue to do. And you all stay strong. Love you, and y'all have a good one. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
One time for Hezekiah. Look, when there ain't no audience to praise you, no comments or hearts on your Instagram to boost your ego. Who you gon' be, bro? Psalm 64 and 4. That they may shoot in secret at the perfect. No free throw. When the bank's closed and all the council frozen, police ain't patrolling, hospitals overflowing, and the whole city smoking, stealing and looting groceries, fighting in the parking lot over a can of beans. Both get ran over by a vehicle that stole it. The driver just keep going. She want a minute, and then lost her mind. 5-year power outages, really the darkest times. Grown men filled with fear and crime. Home invasions, women raped, killing babies, empty shelves, no food trucks, starvation. People won't believe and listen until it pop off. How you gonna leave when they got the bridges blocked off? When everybody lawless, no water out the faucet, the zombies out the coffins. Gotta be quiet and cautious. Strip you naked of any and all possessions. Streets looking like the old westerns. When you can't change your clothes, no dressing room. Know how to dress a wound. Know how to grow your own food, or you just a coon. Prophesying through the microphone, a kufi on. When you stand before the Most High, it's gonna be you alone.
Trillions in D.C. liberal spending sent inflation through the roof. Senator Raphael Warnock voted with Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi for massive new spending.